It's an all-around badass dog. It's got the physical capability.
So you get a 150-pound dog, snaps arms, can rip off faces. How does that play out?
We're not talking about apprehension dog. We're not talking about police, military. We're talking about personal protection.
Hey, Jared here with Species K9 and my fellow trainer holding it down for us in San Antonio. Taylor, how are you today, ma'am?
It's gross weather here. I'm sick of the gross weather.
Rain and thunder in here a little bit. Yeah, it's kind of fun. So we are on episode 8, this thing we call a show. So really quick, big shout out to everyone who's been supporting us, giving us some likes and follows, and really appreciate it. Even for the trolls that like to leave weird comments, it still helps the algorithm, and we thank you anyway. So what is on the agenda today?
I thought it would be fun if we could do the tier ranking trend with protection dog breeds. So ranking the top 10 most common, most popular breeds that are used for personal protection, ranking them for our opinion personally as to what would be our god tier and all the way down to what would be our not really a good idea tier.
Okay. So what are we defining as personal protection? Are we talking about dog training? Talking about just a dog reacting to a threat? What's the criteria here? I like definitions.
Yes, so we are not talking about sport work. We're not talking about a dog biting on a sleeve because they're in play drive or just prey drive. We're talking about a personal protection dog, meaning that in general scenarios, not just in your house, not just in your backyard, you could be out and about, the dog is going to do what it needs to do to be a barrier between you and a threat. It's going to hold its ground at the very least.
So not territorial aggression, not state protection, but personal. You're there, body, person, human,
Yes.
intervenes, aggression. Okay.
Yes.
So what do we got? I haven't even seen the list. I don't even know what the hell you threw on here. So
I know. I know it bothers you that you haven't seen the list, doesn't it? Okay, so down here at the bottom, we've got our top 10 most popular breeds that are used for personal protection. And when I say this is a top 10 list, this is, in my opinion, what I've seen the most. So we're going to go from left to right to each breed and we're going to rank it. So this S tier would be like, for you personally, godlike tier. You would absolutely love having this breed of dog for personal protection. You would recommend it. A is pretty good. It's just lacking something that doesn't make it the godlike tier. B is pretty mid, pretty average. C is, it's not so great, but it's not the worst. And then of course D is like you would personally never use this breed of dog for personal protection. The most difficult part of this exercise is that you and I are going to have to at least somewhat agree. We're going to have to discuss this.
live debate. Okay.
Live debate. Yes. All right. So our first dog breed we have is the Rottweiler. So the Rottweiler, in my opinion, is a powerful dog. It's a strong dog. Technically, they're considered mastiffs, although I don't think they get quite as big as some of the other mastiffs on this list. I would say at the very least, given this dog's history and its physical prowess, it should be an A tier.
As a one dog per tier?
No, you can put multiple dogs in a tier. I just think that, for me personally, it's an all-around badass dog. It's got the physical capability. It's got the willingness most of the time.
You're saying an A category for it?
Yeah, an A. I wouldn't put it in the godlike tier.
I'll give it for now. I'll agree with that. I'm not sure what the other breeds are. They're too small. I can't see them on here, and I don't know what they are. So
Okay.
I will go ahead and take that.
Okay. So our next breed is a Doberman. Do you want to give your background to the Doberman?
Well, it's not my background. It's history. It's real. So Doberman is the original personal protection dog. So it's got to be in the top S. You know, it's bred by a German tax collector who I imagine got tired of getting his ass kicked trying to do his job, and he decided to breed the Doberman, which is essentially a Rottweiler and a Beauceron mix. That's why my Beauceron constantly gets called a Doberman. But you have to. That's the personal. That's the OG. That's the goat right there.
Do you think so? I know that modern Dobermans a lot of times have some health concerns that
Mhm.
breeders especially have to test for. I think isn't blindness a concern often with Dobermans sometimes?
Mhm.
Do you think
Yeah.
health concerns would factor into that at all for you?
No, because if you're doing true, like, I wouldn't, because there's different lines, right? So there's like English lines, American lines, and Dobermans, right? And if you're gonna do this, right, we're gonna be using like European lines who are not being bred for show purposes or things like that. They're working
Yeah.
dogs. So I'm going with an import.
Okay. As far as the utility and the courage, are you saying A or are you saying God tier?
It's exactly
S.
it's S. That's its
Okay.
original job was personal protection.
Okay.
A
Okay.
Rottweiler's original job was for herding and guarding and pulling
Yes.
carts, not personal protection. That's gonna have an offset. Where Dobermans, that's the original.
Okay. The next one in my picture didn't crop nicely, but the next one is the working line German Shepherd. So not just your pet line, show line. This is working line German Shepherd. German Shepherds that were bred to do what the breed was originally intended for.
I would put it in probably A tier personally.
Why is that?
Because it's working line, so we're talking like really high prey drive.
Yeah.
And for personal protection dogs, that's not necessarily a good thing. Like I tell clients all the time, the last thing you want is you become the aggressor.
Yeah.
So you let your dog go on somebody, that person breaks free, runs away. German Shepherds are bred to chase something to the end of the earth just to bite it. And you don't want this dog mauling somebody a block away from where you were at, got initially attacked. You're now the aggressor. Stand by for a lawsuit and possibly going to jail and losing your dog.
Yeah.
And so I take that as a negative in this scenario for true personal protection. Police work, military sport, as all different. It's a completely different scenario. You
Mm.
know, we want a dog that's going to be able to assess a threat and realize the threat is gone.
Mm.
And okay, I'm done. My job is over.
Yeah. I know you can obviously make control there, but I think as far as like working with the dog's natural tendencies, you're saying it's easier with a dog like the Doberman where it doesn't have quite that high of a prey drive where you'd have to work against that.
Yep. There is a thing called instinctual drift. And so now that's something you have to overcome through the obedience. And again, as much as you want to train for real life scenarios, it's never real life until it's real life.
Yeah. I like the analogy that you use where you talk about, you can have a gun for personal protection, but if you shoot someone in the back, that's you being the aggressor now. And so the dog, you don't want your dog to be a liability. You want them to stop when the threat stops.
Yep.
Yeah. So you think A tier, not B tier?
Yes.
I would agree with that. I'd agree with that. The next dog is a Beauceron.
I would put them in probably the same class because they're a herding breed. Even though I have one and she's personal, she's trained in personal protection. I'd put her back in. I'd probably put her in A. A.
A tier? Why not top tier?
Because again, it's that high prey drive. They're a herding breed. They want to chase something to the end of the earth just to bite it. And I might even be persuaded to go to a B level with her or most runs in general because of their size.
Really?
Yeah, she has a really really small head. Her bite is not that big compared to like my German Shepherd. So if her only area was to bite with someone's like thigh, she's not gonna get a good bite because she can't go deep into the thigh. And that's the difference between a American Doberman and a European Doberman. European Dobermans have a much bigger head and a much bigger jaw because they have more of that Rottweiler boxier and not that narrow snout, narrow
Yeah.
muzzle that you see, and that's where the Beauceron has.
So you think B tier?
Yeah, because we're talking about purely stopping a threat,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I could see that. I could see that. So our next one, talking about bite force, is a Presa Canario. This one I think is interesting because it's a Mastiff, so it's got kind of different drives, and it is probably the biggest dog that we've talked about so far. They're powerful.
I would go with probably a right now, just out of what we've ranked so far, I'd probably put it at maybe a C or even a D.
Why is that?
Trainability.
Trainability for personal protection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These types of dogs are typically bred for estate guarding and they're almost to that category, almost like a livestock guardian. So they're not bred to particularly be looking to humans constantly for direction and guidance, and they're more independent animals. Um, and not going to really have the prey drive to want to take movement. So trying to encourage biting through play or prey drive is going to be very different.
Interesting. So for these dogs up here, we're talking about how really high prey drive can be a deterrent in some scenarios because you don't have as much control. Whereas this dog, we're talking about the Presa, they're not having any or as much prey drive is also a deterrent because it makes training harder.
Yeah, because there's different aspects of training for personal protection, and this scenario, encouraging that to go forward and go from like a defense mode into more of a fight to potentially prey drive mode. It's going to get harder to get them to shift to those gears and go in those higher prey drives. I'm not saying it's impossible, but yeah, could you do the Tour de France on a $20 BMX bike from Walmart? Absolutely. I want to? No.
I think what you're saying about the handler sensitivity and wanting to please the handler, that's a huge part. I agree with that. But the sheer power of these dogs, if you had one that you had a great relationship with and you could make control with them, I mean, that's like you want to go into a gunfight with a shotgun because this dog is powerful.
Well, that's another thing though. So you have to always be ready to defend yourself on the stand. So you get a 150-pound dog that snaps arms and rip off faces and like kill somebody with a bite. How does that play out? Versus, oh, my dog gave you a couple puncture wounds to the bicep, get over it. That's the other aspect to it. You can have too much.
Touche. Touche. So C tier.
Yeah, C or even possibly D. I don't know what we have list here. So something always has to be in the D tier. So
Yeah. Well, we can move around later. We can move around. So next up we have the Belgian Malinois, of course.
For me, A tier.
You're not concerned about size. So far, I think it's the smallest dog we've had up.
Yeah, A or B. Simply because if we're talking strictly like personal protection, right? We're talking like family protection, things like that. They're not for everybody. They're such a high drive dog. They have so much energy.
They need jobs.
Yeah, they need jobs. They need to be constantly stimulated, constantly worked.
That's where I was going with it. That for strictly, we're not talking about apprehension dog. We're not talking about police, military. We're talking about personal protection dog. This dog for a family might not be the right fit. That's where I think that would be a detractor to the Malinois.
Yeah, that's why I'd
Yeah.
say probably B.
B tier? Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree. Next up, we have the giant schnauzer.
Ooh.
I like giant schnauzers. I think that they're awesome looking dogs.
What do you think?
Honestly, I would say A tier. They're big dogs, they're powerful. I think they have the factor of being a visual deterrent on top of if they had to hold their ground, they'd be physically capable. Now, they don't have near as much prey drive as like a German Shepherd, but again, you're not necessarily just working with prey drive.
So AKC, I didn't know what class they had them under, but they have them under working with the Rottweiler. Yeah, I can go with A tier on that one.
Yeah. Cool. So next up, we got a Dutchie, a Dutch Shepherd. I am a personal huge fan of Dutch Shepherds, but I will not let it cloud my judgment.
A or B, it's going to be in there. You gotta remember all those herding breeds, and especially in that region, Germany, France, Europe, for a long, long time, they weren't segregated by their country. It was by the job, right? So those dogs were just the shepherd's dogs. That's how they were known. It wasn't until later through the selective breeding and things started separating out. So I'd throw it in there at the B tier.
So I have read a lot of modern Dutch Shepherds have a ton of nerviness and a ton of dominance aggression, right? So there's a lot of conflict with the handler, especially when people are doing super hard corrections for things, and you could be getting a dog that might not be a very good fit for a family environment.
Yeah, they're just like the Malinois. They require a lot of work. Any type of controlled aggression, protection work. Having a dominant dog is nothing wrong with that. You just have to have a handler that understands what's going on with this dog.
Yes.
And understand this dog has no problem like zero bite inhibition and willing to just bite somebody just because.
Yeah. For all the Dutch Shepherd owners that are upset that they're in the B tier, I personally, I love these dogs. I've known a Dutch Shepherd that was one of my favorite dogs ever. But I think just talking about generally for personal protection for the average person, there's better choices, I think. But they're gorgeous. The next one we have is a Bouvier de Flandres. This is kind of a breed that a lot of people don't think of.
What are you thinking?
I'm tempted to say similar things to the giant schnauzer, so a little bit more of a manageable dog. However, I don't think they have as much of the physical prowess. I would say B tier because another element of personal protection is just the stopping the fight before it starts. You know, like if I'm walking down the street with a Rottweiler, you know, you might think twice versus if you see something and you're dumb and you think it's a poodle, you know what I'm saying? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a working line dog, much like a Rottweiler. Yeah, I'd probably put it in that same category. Never having worked with one, I'd probably put it in that A category.
A category.
Yeah.
Not the B category, the A
Yeah,
category.
well, because again, so it's a herding dog, right? But it's not going to have the drive of a Malinois or something like that. And it's got some size to it. It's got a little scariness to it. But I think because it has that herding drive instinct, it's looking for that human for guidance.
Hmm.
So it's naturally going to be easy trainable for those things.
Yeah, okay, you've convinced me. I can see A tier. Our last dog is kind of the new. Everybody seems to be talking about protection with Connie Corsos.
How many calls I get this last several months? Everyone has one, wants to start training with it. Yeah, so let's screw with some people. Call it a King Crusoe. Make the comments. It helps the algorithm, people. Um, it, I'd have to probably put it in like either like a C or D tier.
Yeah.
And it's really nothing against the breeds, more of the breeders. They're just not, these dogs aren't bred the way they used to be. People are breeding for looks, they're not breeding for traits. They're breeding
Mhm.
out all the traits that made that dog a really cool, estate protection, territorial aggression, dog. And they're not anymore,
Yeah.
for the most part. I just don't see it. Um, we want a pretty dog, and we don't have dogs with jobs here anymore. Um, so I definitely put it in like probably a D tier, and also
Yeah.
just like for the fact of the size of it. So imagine this playing out in court. You get sued, and they pop this picture up on the screen of your dog, and you got the cropped ears and the tail, and some attorneys talking about how this thing is essentially a pit bull on steroids, and you got a guy over here with a missing arm, they tried taking your purse and you're trying to justify letting this 120 pound, 150-pound dog go for your purse.
Yeah. I also think we're seeing a lot of things in the news now about people with these dogs are getting killed, right? So it's dog on owner aggression. You know, they're the breed of dog that you tend to have to do everything right. You need to be the leader in your household. I think a lot of people just don't have the ability to own such a powerful breed like that. They don't have the knowledge or the ability.
These two of the bigger dogs, C and D, those things are going to eat you out of house and home. Those things are going to eat $500 a month in dog food.
You always talk about that.
Like it's a cost factor, right? What's going to eat more? A little, 80-pound Doberman or 180-pound Mastiff?
Yeah. So you've also talked about the life expectancy, how you could put however many years it takes to train a protection dog into a mastiff, and that's a much higher proportion of their life. You know, mastiffs don't live nearly as long as other breeds of dogs.
All those factors. Really, everything's more expensive when you have a dog that size.
Yeah.
Heartworm medication's more expensive. Visits are more expensive. I
Yeah.
have a English Mastiff I'm working with, and got a second phase. We started using Star Mark collars, and I told the owners, you're gonna have to buy two Star Mark collars. We'll
Hmm.
piece them together so you can have two of them. So
Yeah.
uh, you have all these other factors that go into these things outside of the job it can do, right? Are all these dogs on here capable of doing personal protection in some form? Absolutely. If you can get away, the dog did its job. You don't need this dog to like maul somebody to death or break arms or rip arms off. It did its job. That's what you
Yeah.
want at the end of the day. And there's people out there, but I don't care. I mean, someone trying to hurt me, my dog can kill him. Well, that's all fine and dandy. I hope you have a great attorney. I hope you have a massive bank account, because your attorney doesn't work for free.
Yeah.
They're going to say, hey, yeah, $50,000 retainer, we'll start working for you. Those are
No.
those are the liabilities of it.
If we were to be talking about something different, like if we were to change this to estate protection, or, I just want a dog that in my yard, if somebody tries to jump my fence, is going to take care of business, this list would probably change drastically.
Yeah, it almost flipped.
Yeah. Yeah. But as far as personal protection goes, I feel good about this list. I feel good about this list.
Yeah, if we were talking like police dogs, things like that, your German Shepherd's going to be up there.
Malinois. Yeah.
All of B would be enough. Would be an A, or A or a S, and then definitely a German Shepherd would be up there, probably S. That was fun. Yeah, it makes you think about it. Like that's what this whole like channel's about, right? Education and thought process, and that's what you want to think about when you're getting a dog, right? Think about what this is for. That's why one of the things we offer is the consultation for dog selection, to have these conversations with people.
So look forward to the flame war in the comments saying, I got a kind of course on he'd F you up.
Yeah, I'm sure of it. Absolutely.
Hey man, I got a cat that if he was pissed enough, you'd be going to the hospital. So
Yeah, I have a neighbor cat like that. Yeah, he's like chased me. He's like chased my dog.
does he run sideways to make himself
Yeah,
look better? Or is it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
he's a little funny guys. Well, perfect. That's fun, Taylor. Appreciate you putting that together. That was a fun little exercise. So that is a wrap for today, folks. We appreciate your time and diligence, and we hope that you share, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. But until next time, everybody, train.